It's Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. The more details come out about the Charlotte light rail murder, the worse it gets. A revolution in the Himalayas, and I finally think I understand Soros and his soft-on-crime district attorneys. Next on the AM Update. Well, the full video of the murder of Irina Zaruzka on that Charlotte, North Carolina light rail carriage has been released, and it goes down exactly as it was depicted in earlier accounts. Irina, just off of her shift at a pizzeria, sits down in front of a man who got apparently enraged that a white woman would sit down in front of him, flips out his knife, stabs her to death. I watched that video, and that poor young woman, I don't think she even knew what happened. She's just sitting there on her phone one moment. Her throat hurts. She's in a lot of pain. She can't say anything because he stabbed her right in the jugular. And the last thing she sees is her deranged killer. So that entire video came out yesterday. Now, President Trump, once again, from the Oval Office itself, addressed what's going on and laid the blame exactly where it should be.
For far too long, Americans have been forced to put up with Democrat-run cities that set loose savage, bloodthirsty criminals to prey on innocent people, really very, very innocent people. In every place, they control radical left judges, politicians, and activists, and they've adopted a policy of catch and release for thugs and killers. In Charlotte, North Carolina, we saw the results of these policies when a 23-year-old woman who came here from Ukraine met her bloody end on a public train. And here's a picture of it. This is the picture of it. And this is a picture of the woman, a beautiful young girl that never had problems in life, with a magnificent future in this country. And now she's dead.
President Trump continued that address, laying the blame at the feet of just corrupt and just utterly recalcitrant public policies and politicians. And this is a thing with both parties. This whole thing about restorative justice, rehabilitation instead of punishment. That's how we got all of this. This is all DEI racialist idolatry. That's why we are in this position to begin with. Russ Ferguson is the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina. He made the announcement yesterday. The suspect in this case, DeCarlos Brown Jr., is facing federal charges.
As a native of Charlotte, I'm so sad to say that our city has gotten to this place. I was born here. I grew up here. I remember when the light rail was built. I remember the development it spurred. I remember the excitement. And to think now that you can't even feel comfortable riding that train hits me deep. The light rail brought this city access to jobs, access to education. People could take the train to college. It really put Charlotte on the map. And this incident has really, really injured that. Now, DeCarlos Brown Jr., who we allege stabbed Irina Zaruzka, is in state custody on first-degree murder charges. But I'm here today to announce that we're going to supplement those state charges with federal charges. These federal charges will go alongside the murder case in state court, and we hope that they will ensure justice for Irina, for her family, and for the whole Charlotte community. The charge we are bringing is in Title 18, which is the criminal code. It's Section 1992A7, which is the law that Congress passed really for this situation. It is an act of violence on a mass transportation system. U.S.
Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina, Russ Ferguson, fighting back tears there as he describes how the city of Charlotte has gotten to the point where they are at. He also said that if convicted, DeCarlos Brown Jr. could spend life in prison without the possibility of parole, or they could seek the death penalty. Also, at that same news conference, the FBI agent in charge, that would be James Barnacle, also had many of the same things to say and says law enforcement will do their best, but it's going to take more.
Well, you mentioned that this was not a policing failure. Where exactly did the system fail?
Well, it's hard to say. This man was charged 14 times. There's been numerous encounters with police departments. He was arrested by the CMPD in January, but he's still on our streets. So we'll have to figure this out, right? This is not a problem the FBI or the U.S. Attorney's Office can solve. We can work cases. We can react to crime. We can be proactive and try to prevent crime. Look, I think, President Trump's spoken about this case in the last few days, and he has daughters. I have daughters. So it really hits close to home, right? And why do we have people, whether there's mental health issues or violent crime issues, why are they on the streets? Why are our buses, our trains, our transportation systems almost homeless shelters or mental health shelters? We need to fix that. We need to clean that up. We can only do so much. This is going to take a lot more work from society, from the people in power and the politicians. It's not something I can solve, but we can work cases and we can bring people to justice.
James Barnacle, FBI special agent in charge on what happened in the system that explains why DeCarlos Brown was out on the streets riding the light rail without actually having a ticket. That's coming from a reporter, I'm sure, who has voted for and supported candidates who go for soft on crime policies. Back at the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt absolutely ripped the media for their coverage of the Irina Zaruzka murder.
Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, I will add, was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Irina should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities. And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer. Here's the truth that every American must know. Too many innocent people across the country continue to pay the price of the failed experiment known as cashless bail that has been championed by the Democrat Party for years.
There's Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary at the White House yesterday, absolutely laying waste to the media inside that very room, and good for her. I think I finally understand why George Soros and his merry band of soft-on-crime district attorneys and other politicians at other levels who pursue so-called restorative justice, I understand what makes them tick now. And I'm going to talk about that on Air Analysis coming up a little bit later. But first, a couple of other items here. So, Morning Joe, for whatever reason, decided to have border czar Tom Homan on their program yesterday. That was a bad idea.
I'd love some transparency as to why a lot of these people have been disappeared. You say you have data. We would love to see it. The American people should see this data.
Well, here's the rhetoric again, right? You just meant disappeared. That is a ridiculous thing to say.
Why?
Because ICE is doing the same thing we've done for decades. But because of the last 4 years, ICE wasn't allowed to enforce the law. ICE was told to sit back, and you can't arrest an illegal alien for simply being here legally. You got to wait till they commit a serious crime and get convicted of that crime. That's what Secretary Mayorkas' instructions were. And that's why you saw so much crime in this country coming from the illegal alien population, because there's no law enforcement. But we're doing the same thing right now that we did when I started back in 1984. ICE agents are enforcing the laws enacted by Congress. They're appropriated funding to enforce these laws. If you don't like what ICE is doing, then go protest Congress. However, to say we disappeared people, no. We're arresting people that are in the country illegally and our public safety threat. We know exactly who we're going to arrest when we go look for them. We have a case file in front of us. We have all those facts. This is not disappearing people. This is a planned, targeted enforcement operation that we're doing.
So Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe just walked straight into an active propeller blade right there, known as Tom Homan. For some reason, they wanted to have the border czar on MSNBC, and as you could hear, that was a bad decision. Well, the Overton window, when it comes to different vaccines and things of that nature, that seems to be shifting. Also, a revolution in the Himalayas and Islam explained in under 3 minutes. That's coming up next. That is the sound of various scenes on the streets of Kathmandu in Nepal, where violent protests have erupted in recent days. Maybe the final straw, at least that's the way it's being portrayed in various media outlets, was the government trying to ban social media in the country. As a result, a bunch of youth, the Zoomers, Nepalese Zoomers, took the streets for a protest in Kathmandu. That protest turned deadly after police opened fire, killing 19 people. So, in the aftermath of that, things absolutely went to heck. Basically, these Zoomers have embarked on burning Kathmandu to the ground. Now, the media narrative that's being portrayed here is that they turned off social media, and so the Zoomers burned Kathmandu to the ground. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I mean, Nepal, from my understanding, has long been a haven of absolutely wicked and corrupt governance, and it seems like the young people in that country have had enough. The Prime Minister of Nepal has resigned. There were various officials in the government of Nepal who were taken from their homes, dragged through the streets, beaten, some killed from what reports I've seen, although that has not been confirmed yet. A bunch of ministers for Nepal's government were able to flee via helicopter. Some incredible scenes out of the country of Nepal over in the Himalayas. Seems like a revolution is taking place. Well, Aaron Siri is a well-known attorney lawyer who has worked on very high-profile informed consent cases all over the country. He had the opportunity to testify in front of a Senate panel yesterday. Senator Richard Blumenthal tried to corner him doing the whole, you're not an expert number. Here's how that went for old Rick Blumenthal.
We've been talking about medical issues. You're not a medical doctor, are you?
No, sir.
And you're not an immunologist or biologist or any kind of...
Or vaccinologist, no, but I depose them regularly, including the world's leading ones with regards to vaccines, and I have to make my claims based on actual evidence when I go to court with regards to vaccines. I don't get to rely on titles.
Okay.
Wow.
But you're not a doctor.
Oh, my goodness. Aaron Siri, very hostile, and I love it. Aaron Siri sitting there in front of Rick Blumenthal, who did the whole, you're not an expert, you don't get to talk about anything you're not an expert at. And Aaron Siri's like, I'm a kind of a bit of a super expert because I have to, depose some of the world's leading doctors. And so I have to know my stuff. And in the court of law, you don't just get to rely on titles. You have to actually know your stuff and root them in data and science. And Rick Blumenthal kind of threw him for a loop. But you're not a doctor. That stuff is old and it is tired. Well, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made a huge announcement last night in conjunction with President Trump, taking action on something that's long been speculated, targeting pharmaceutical advertising on TV.
The president just signed an executive order that's an historic change in the way that pharmaceutical advertising is done on television. And the order basically reinstates or gives us now the opportunity to reinstate the 1997 rules. Prior to 1997, pharmaceutical advertisers were required to put all the side effects on their ads. Many of them didn't advertise because it lengthened because of what it did to the length of the advertising. And the removal of that requirement in 1997, FDA changed the rule to allow them to report the side effects on a website or on a telephone. And they only had to report a few of them on television. And that triggered a proliferation of these ads. There's only 2 countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer advertising by pharmaceutical companies on television. We're one of those countries. New Zealand is the other. It's had a disastrous impact on human health, on people's relationships with their doctors, and really on the entire gestalt where Americans are led to believe that there's a pill for every ill.
So goodbye cable news. Goodbye cable television in general. I mean, maybe. When you're going to have to put every single side effect into every single pharmaceutical commercial, guess what pharma companies and pharma advertising is going to be purchasing a lot less of? Airtime. If it's going to take you 10 minutes to get through every single commercial because of all the side effects, you're not going to be able to purchase too many more commercials. RFK Jr. was also asked if this is opening the door to an outright ban on pharma advertising on television. He did not shut that door. So this could just be a precursor, no pun intended, pharmaceutical pun. This could just be a precursor to more things to come. Something that's been speculated for a long time, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Of course, the problem that RFK Jr. outlined there, making Americans believe that there's just a pill for everything. You don't have to change lifestyle, and you could get rid of the nightly news at the same time because they're pretty much wholly subsidized by Big Pharma. Also, I want to touch on this story real quick. A Michigan judge has dismissed criminal charges against 15 people who signed documents saying Donald Trump won the state's electoral votes in 2020. It's the latest loss in the prosecutor's efforts to trying to wage lawfare against people who had questions about the 2020 election. In May, an Arizona judge sent that state's so-called fake elector case back to a grand jury. The Nevada case is stuck in jurisdictional appeals after a court dismissed the case last year. In Georgia, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office is fighting to keep its prosecution alive after a court ruled that the DA's office should be removed from the case. Fannie Willis all over in Fulton County. By the way, in Michigan, this judge who threw out this criminal case against the 15 people who had questions, the so-called fake electors that the media has called them, she was appointed by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. So that is an interesting development, to say the least. Well, this is an older video, as in not recent. This is former FBI agent John Guandolo, who this just came across my feed randomly in recent days, who explains Islam perfectly in 3 minutes. Now, this is a perspective I think that's really important for the West to hear, especially if you're a Christian or Jew.
The entire purpose of Islam, according to all Islamic doctrine, is to ensure that there is an Islamic state throughout the entire world called a caliphate, and under that, Sharia or Islamic law is the law of the land. That's it. Islam is no more complicated than that. Islam breaks the entire world into 2 parts. The Dar al-Islam, where Sharia is the law of the land, and the Dar al-Harb, the house or abode of war, where there is not Sharia as the law of the land. The function of Islam is to eliminate the Dar al-Harb until the entire world is a Dar al-Islam. And the vehicle to do that is called what? Jihad, which in 100% of all published Islamic law is only defined as warfare against non-Muslims. So let's just put that on the line. And so we're here talking national security issues. We have people here that are running for the office of President of the United States, and we have to begin there. And what I would put forth is that since, and actually prior to, but since 9/11, our entire national security apparatus has been unprofessional in its approach to this war, from the 4-star generals to the office of the president to the national security staff to the leaders of DHS when it was created, the FBI, the CIA, and other agencies. Because we have said this has nothing to do with Islam, despite the fact that our warfighting doctrine says when you analyze an enemy, you start with who he says he is and why he's fighting. And 100% of this enemy that we're facing, from the jihadi in Chattanooga to the 9/11 hijackers and everybody before and in between, have all said we're Muslims waging jihad in the cause of Allah in order to impose Islamic law and establish caliphate, period. So that's what it is. And if we look in Islamic law, authoritative Islamic law, the kind you get at mosque bookstores, not at Barnes & Noble, you will see that 100% of them say that jihad is warfare against non-Muslims. And it's total warfare. It's not just guns and bombs. It's psychological warfare. It is political warfare. It's subversion. It is the whole 9 yards. It's total warfare, something that our DOD has not been practicing. I would say you'd have to go back towards Reagan administration and maybe even beyond that. Complete and total war against non-Muslims.
That is former FBI agent John Guandolo, who addressed at some point in the past, I couldn't find the date on that, the National Security Summit, perfectly explaining Islam and why is it such a pervasive threat in the West. In just about 3 minutes. I think we would do well to get that through our skulls over and over again. This is what Islam teaches. They are a religion not only of violence but dominion. Principally, violence to achieve dominion. That's what they're all about. That's what Islam is. It is about power and dominion. Well, when we come back for one final segment, air analysis, I think I finally understand what makes George Soros and his merry band of district attorneys, what makes them tick when it comes to soft on crime policies. That's coming up next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. I've long kind of wondered, what is the point of George Soros and just overtly picking district attorneys, electing district attorneys? Why is that his focus, seemingly? Why is it his focus to select district attorneys, those who are actually bringing about charges, or should be bringing about charges against the evildoers in our midst? Why is that his focus? Why is it his focus to bring people into power at the local city level that will enact policies that, when actually practiced, not in the ethereal realm, not in hypotheticals, but when actually practiced, leads to more crime? And more crime is not very politically popular. Why has this been his modus operandi? And why has he even been successful at it? These are some questions that I never really understood the answers to. Why do you put people in power who are going to enact policies that will make the lives of the people that they are actually in power over, or working for, depending on your perspective, it's going to make their lives miserable and will inevitably, you would think, lead to backlash against these very people you're installing into positions like district attorney? Why? I think the Irina Zaruzka story finally crystallized why this is the case, and you're not going to like the answer. And I think the reason my question has finally been answered with this story, when we've had oodles of stories like this, crime on public transportation, crime in civic, public, shared, mutual spaces, is because of the video. And it's not just the video of the crime itself in action. It's not the... Again, this is seared into my brain now. Just the look of utter shock on that poor young woman's face. She didn't even know what happened before she just fell asleep, out of consciousness. It's not that in and of itself. It's the lack of reaction or action from her immediate bystanders. 3-4 people in her immediate vicinity won't even look at her. Now, 90 seconds after she fell to the floor of that ill-fated light rail carriage, there were a couple of individuals who came over and tried their best to render aid, and those people should be commended. But taken as a whole, young woman stabbed in the jugular for the crime of sitting in front of, let's just call it what it is, not schizophrenia, demon-possessed man. Got stabbed in the jugular for that. That's bad enough. But when you then see the lack of humanity from those in her immediate vicinity, I understand why George Soros and his merry band of district attorneys, soft-on-crime district attorneys, I understand why they pursue soft-on-crime policies. I understand that now. It's pretty simple and it's pretty dark. It's to demoralize us. That's why. That's the only goal. Just nihilistic demoralization. Because when you make a people, when you make your cities demoralized, when you tell them, no, J.B. Pritzker, we heard that last week, that's a big city, there's going to be crime. When you tell them there's no hope, that you have to live this way. A demoralized people is a people that's easier to control. So that's why George Soros, for many years now, has pursued district attorneys. That's why. It's simple, pretty dark, pretty nihilistic, but it's pretty simple. If you're trying to change and you're trying to have a communist revolution at the local level, demoralize the people first. So that's both dark and both, I think, an opportunity to understand the enemy's game plan, or in the case of the human pawns of the enemy, the opponent's game plans. They're trying to demoralize us, so don't be demoralized. If you see somebody who needs help, you got to help them, regardless of what might the cost be. You might be the next Daniel Penny. Are you willing? Are you willing to take that hit for what's good and true and beautiful and right? I think that's the message. That's going to do it for a Wednesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.